Arizona housing prices continue to rise with no sign of them going back down. What does this mean for buyers and sellers in 2025? An expert shares how the market might shift. Plus, it's time to start implementing all of those propositions you voted yes on. What does that look like for Arizona sheriffs now managing Prop 314? It's all that and more this evening on Broomhead. Welcome, I'm Mike Broomhead. This is a new show we're starting here on CW7 every Sunday. We'll be looking at the top issues in Arizona, talking with businesses, and looking at the impact of the changes that will affect you. It's the biggest issues in Arizona explained. And we will be bringing Arizona's top political consultants, economic experts, and political figures for insight. Before we get into today's topics, let's talk about what I think is the biggest story going on locally and nationally, and that, of course, are the fires in LA County. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with everybody affected. The first responders, we pray for their safety. Some people have lost everything they own, and some have even lost their lives. So all eyes are fixed on what's happening in LA. But it made me start thinking about the Valley, and are we as prepared as we should be? So on my radio show, I sat down with Brian Willingham. He is the president of the Firefighters Union, representing firefighters across the Valley. And I talked about preparedness. They are short-staffed, we don't have enough fire stations, and we certainly don't have enough equipment. This is the big issue. The firefighters and all first responders, police officers are short-staffed and ill-equipped. We had 4 measures in Phoenix that were signed by the voters or voted on by the voters that said we want more money and we want to bolster public safety. If we are serious about doing that, it's time to hold politicians accountable so we fully fund, fully staff, and fully equip the first responders across our valley. That's the life we want. Those are the cities we want. That's what we need. With median home prices just over $400,000 and mortgage rates over 6%, where is Arizona's housing market headed? We're talking with an expert next. It's important to recognize and thank the fine Arizona men and women who are serving in our country's military. One of the ways we like to do that is a segment called From Arizona for America, and it's brought to you by my good friends at Sanderson Ford. So join me in honoring Marine Corps Sergeant Shane O'Neill, a native of Glendale, Arizona. He's an airborne and air delivery specialist with the 3rd Landing Support Battalion stationed in Okinawa, Japan. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, go to the news tab at cw7az.com. Housing market, housing crisis, when can I buy a home? What are interest rates going to do? Joining us, Trevor Halpern, who is from Halpern Residential. I really need your expertise on this.
Yeah.
I've been here for 30 years. I've watched what's happened, but that doesn't mean I understand why it's happening.
Right.
So let's start with mortgage rates.
Sure.
What is affecting mortgage rates? We've seen them tick up again, even though interest rates have moderated. What really affects mortgage rates, and what can we expect to happen?
Yeah, really the biggest driver of mortgage rates is the yield on the 10-year Treasury note. What that means is it's basically a risk assessment that the marketplace puts out there saying the yield on this note is going to increase or decrease based on a bunch of external factors. Job rates, unemployment, inflation. There's so many things that go into that yield that it's really hard to predict where it's going to go. You know, like when the Fed adjusts their rate,
Right.
Typically people go, oh, interest rates are coming down. The last time the Fed adjusted their rate, mortgage interest rates shot up.
Right.
So it's an inverse relationship. That doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it goes down as the Fed rate goes down, but really it is when the chairman of the Fed goes up and speaks, the duration of the speech sometimes affects mortgage interest rates. The ancillary things that the Fed chairman speaks about affects rates. And so if they get long-winded and they start talking too broadly, then the market senses risk, and we can see mortgage interest rates go up. And so there is no direct thing that we can point to say this is going to affect mortgage interest rates. It is a big conglomeration of a number of things, but really mortgage interest rates track with that 10-year Treasury note yield. Over time, you can see how they do. We've seen a disconnect even from that over let's call it the last 18 months, where they act inverse. And so it confuses the marketplace, it confuses the consumer, it confuses the professional,
Right.
it confuses the mortgage professional. So it's hard to throw a dart and nail exactly what affects those rates.
The other part is supply and demand.
Correct.
We've got big demand. People are moving here. We
Yep.
love that. Our economy seems to be booming, but the supply is not increasing.
Right.
What's the answer to that supply question? You and I talked before the cameras
Yeah.
went on. 65,000 homes being built in 2007. We're not anywhere near that number.
Not
Is that really the crux of the problem? We just don't have enough supply?
Yeah, in a thriving economy, in a thriving environment where people are moving to Phoenix, moving to Arizona for a number of reasons: climate, environment, socioeconomic reasons, a number of reasons why people are coming here. We simply don't have the supply. You know, you look around the valley and you see things going vertical, right? You see those apartment complexes being built, you see condominium complexes being built. That is part of an infrastructure push that can help. However, we are way behind on new home starts in order to fully supply the demand that we have with our population growth.
Is that more of a labor force issue in the construction industry? It can't be interest, because I would imagine developers right now would be chomping at the bit to develop land and build houses.
Well, developers sense risk. You know, developers, in my professional career, I have found that many developers are about as skittish of people as anyone that I know. When they're going to invest big money into things, they really look at everything. And sometimes they get into analysis paralysis. So I know a bunch of home builders. I know a bunch of developers right now. They're like, I don't really know where things are going to go or how are things going to play. So I'm just going to keep my powder dry right now.
See, that's. I'm so glad you're here, because I as the naive person, I see that as the opposite. I would think that builders are looking for any piece of land to build on. But the risk assessment, do you believe that in the next 12 months, 24 months, that we're going to see interest rates moderate a little bit, and are we going to see more interest in building?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, the further we look out, the more opaque my crystal ball becomes, right? If it's right in front of us, we can say, hey, here's what it looks like. But 12, 24 months out, we start really losing sight of our ability to predict. That being said, when you look at the big analysts, let's call it Goldman, let's call it the National Association of Realtors, the Mortgage Bankers Association, they're all predicting a decrease in mortgage interest rates in the coming months and in the coming year. So with that, it's going to increase demand because it becomes more affordable for people to purchase. With that demand, you know, we're not the only ones looking at that data. Home builders are looking at that data. Investors are looking at that data saying, hey, if mortgage interest rates go down, we're going to see a bump in demand. And so it does make sense to start building homes, buying land, that sort of stuff. But it's typically a lag. You find home builders lag as they're looking at the data. And then when things start getting weird, they're the first ones to shut off. So you can watch home builders, big national builders too, as kind of an indication of what they think is going to happen with the marketplace.
Love the conversation. It's always great to get an education. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
we'll be back. New year, new laws in place. Successful propositions are being put into practice, but not everyone is ready for the change. Find out how Arizona sheriffs are trying to manage Prop 314. One of the biggest issues in the country is the immigration and the border issue, but it's not bigger anywhere than it is here in Arizona. Yavapai Sheriff David Rhodes is joining us. Sheriff, thanks for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Mike.
The Sheriff's Association and Prop 314, the good and the bad of this. Can you explain your stance on 314? Is it the right thing to do? Do we need funding for this so that the sheriffs that are affected by this have the money they need for enforcement? How's this going to work?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, Prop 314 was put before the voters and passed overwhelmingly. This is a mandate from the voters. They're expecting something to happen. And the Arizona Sheriffs Association are responding to that, asking for an increase to a fund that's already exists. It's a local border security grant, and it's an appropriation that we've had for many years. The last 2 years, it was $17 million. This last year, $17 million was appropriated, $25 million was requested. We're asking to double the number of requests, or the amount of the request, so that we can start to prepare for whatever it is that's going to happen. Prop 314 still, as you know, Mike, has to survive some legal challenges. Yep. There are some different things that are going on. But I think it's important for everybody to understand that you don't just turn on a water spigot and have law enforcement. You know, these things take time. It starts with money. You have to have the money first before you can start to buy the equipment, have the infrastructure, hire the people, get the training done. And from the moment you approve that money and it actually starts to come, you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 24 months to see any measurable success. Now, if you wait for things to happen, like to snail pace through the court system to have a decision made, and then you try to do this, well, heck, you're years out. People are frustrated with this topic. The insecure border, they want to see action. They gave local law enforcement the authority to do some things. They expect us to do it. That's what we're trying to do.
I don't think most people understand the enormity of the pressure it puts on agencies, sheriff's departments, especially down on the border, but all across the state of Arizona with the fentanyl interdiction, with the emergency response, with rescue efforts, that sheriff's departments like yours are taking resources that can be put into use in their communities with other crimes, and they're working on this issue already, and this is going to add to that.
Well, 100%. Now you got to remember that Prop 314 has a few different provisions. One is the employer provision, mandatory e-verify. There's some criminal or some criminal investigations that could occur out of a failure to do that. Another provision of it is the mandatory minimum sentencing for selling fentanyl to somebody who ultimately dies, and it really reduces the burden of proof there, which is good because it was really difficult to prosecute people for that. Then the big one is the border trespass law, which essentially says if you are in the country illegally and you entered at an illegal port of entry, and when you say illegal port of entry, think of like coming through a hole in the fence or climbing over the wall or something like that. Doesn't mean if you entered, if you're in the country illegally, but you came through a legal port of entry. We're talking about trying to secure those areas between the port of entry, right? So local law enforcement can make an arrest for a violation of that law if it survives the Court of Appeals challenge. Well, local law enforcement doesn't have the resources to be out there currently even looking at or dealing with any of these issues. And so, but the citizens want us to. That's what they thought that they were voting for. That's what they were promised. And the sheriff said very pointedly at the when this was put on the ballot that this was unfunded at this moment, and if the voters passed it, we expected the legislature and the governor, the elected officials, to come forward and fund what the voters are putting forward. So we don't have the sheriffs that are down there, law enforcement along the border. They don't have the resources necessary to be effective at this at all. Now we're expecting some pretty big changes coming from the new federal administration. We don't know what they are. I don't want to speculate about it, but we want to be prepared to participate and help out. You saw a lot of things are going this way right now. The Lake and Riley Act, hopefully it's going to get through the Senate. I think people are seeing the common sense behind deporting some of these people that are in the country illegally. We want to be there ready to help.
Well, Sheriff, I always appreciate speaking with you, and you're an expert on the topic. Thanks for coming into the studio with us, and it's great to finally sit down face to face.
Absolutely, Mike.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back. Now, don't go anywhere. With the possibility of Trump imposing more tariffs at the start of his presidency, how will this affect business and consumers in Arizona? Arizona Chamber of Commerce explains the possible impact next. Here's a look at some upcoming events in January that should be on your radar. The inauguration of the 47th President Donald Trump, Monday, January 20th. It begins at 10 a.m. here in Arizona. Barrett-Jackson, the largest and longest-running collector car auction in Arizona, January 18th to 26th at Westworld of Scottsdale. The Arizona economy is on everybody's mind, and talking about it right now, Danny Seiden, President and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. What a title.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Glad to be here. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. I want to start off with a couple of questions about where we are. Everybody had talked about Arizona being positioned very well, industry coming to Arizona, the big announcement that just happened in ASU about the lab. Right. It seems like the momentum is carrying on. Do you feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. That, and I know you had Dr. Crow on your show. He's a big reason of why that announcement happened, but make no mistake, that was years in the making. To land that, I don't think it's all been announced yet, but we're talking billions of dollars coming into Arizona to create a state-of-the-art research and development facility around advanced packaging. And advanced packaging is kind of that next stage of semiconductors. That's a lot of jobs, that's a lot of vendors, and that's a lot of money back into the economy. Huge win.
And it's a lot of high-paying, high-tech jobs. These are high-skilled labor jobs,
Absolutely.
and that's exactly what we've been needing for such a long time in Arizona.
They are, and even the skilled workers who aren't engineers who are part of these programs,
Right.
you know, the VOTECs, people like that working on the lines, that it pays way more than the normal private sector job.
So looking at that, we're rolling into so many different things now. We got a new administration coming in, and there is this big argument about when and how and what the effect is if President Trump keeps his promise on tariffs. Can you explain your position on this and how tariffs are used and what do you think is going to happen? How could it affect our economy?
Absolutely, it can affect our economy, you know, in major ways. But let's just like take a big step back. So what I've found is I'll hear someone say, "Well, President Trump's going to put a tariff on Mexico." That's not technically true. What a tariff is, it's a price on the importer, right? So, Mike, if you or I have a company, and I have many members who import goods to make things here in Arizona, they're the ones who will be paying that tariff. They're the ones who pay the tariff. So it's our importers who do it. So that's the problem, because then they'll take that cost and they'll pass it down to consumers. So think for a second, we do a lot of automotive parts here in Arizona. That comes from both Canada and Mexico. If those tariffs come in, we're going to see prices go up for consumers. But again, let's quote Shakespeare, past his prologue. The last time President Trump talked a lot about tariffs, he used it to get a better deal for America in the USMCA agreement.
But would you agree then, sorry to interrupt you, would you agree though that tariffs are a tool that are used for just some of those purposes?
100%. Traditionally, tariffs have been used for, you know, two main reasons. The first is, you know, raising revenue. It was what we had before taxes. It was always tariffs. Then it became more about protectionism of certain industries. And those were kind of the two main eras. I think we're entering a third era of how tariffs are now being used, and that's to force countries to do other policies. When President Trump talks about the tariffs with Mexico, what did he say yesterday? 5%, and if they don't fix who's coming across their border, we go up to 25%. So that's a punitive measure on another country to try and enact some kind of policy change. So that's a little bit different, and it's new, but it's the world we live in.
So can you give me an example of what the effect would be? You used automotive parts, but are there other areas? Because the biggest trading partner with Arizona is Mexico.
Mexico times 4. So I'm going to go right to tomatoes. I'm going to go right to produce. We get a lot of our tomatoes from Mexico. You're going to be paying more for your tomatoes. As they're imported in, that cost will get passed down to consumers. We hear a lot about the price of eggs. Get ready to hear about the price of tomatoes if these tariffs go through. Now, I will tell you, there are ways in which our deal with Mexico could be better. There are ways in which our deal with Canada could be better. And perhaps President Trump is doing what he does, and that's the art of the negotiation, the art of the deal. And he's going to get a better deal for us. So with a new administration, you want to be optimistic, but you can't ignore history. And history shows what happens with tariffs. You know, overall, they lead to escalating trade wars, and that can lead to recessions. That can lead, gosh, we actually got our income tax out of a failed tariff run in the 1890s. So, I mean, you got to pay attention to history and where these things go.
All right, last question. I got about a minute or so left, but I wouldn't an upside here, at least in my mind, be with the policies on mining and drilling that we're going to see movement maybe on the Resolution Copper mine, that we're going to start being able to free up some of this industry?
Well, now you're talking about the good news coming out of the new administration. That's 100% right. What President Trump, his whole theme, Mike, and everyone should know this, whether you like him or not, he wants America to be making stuff again. He wants everything to be made here. He wants to create a complete global supply chain here in our own country. In order to do that, we need critical minerals, we need the energy, and those two things have been blocked by the prior administration through the EPA regulations, excess regulations, and really just coming down and ruling on things. So I think for Trump to get what he wants, even with tariffs, we need to have all of those permits squared away for our mining and everything else. And I think we'll see that. I think he has talked about that just as he's talked about tariffs. So all in all, we can see a lot of good out of this. And again, I think it's all part of the negotiation with him.
I love talking about this with you. I know you get so excited about it. You've been such a big player in it for so long. So thanks for coming down. Thanks for the update, and I can't wait to do it
Thanks
again.
for having me on. Anytime.
All right, man. That's Danny's side. We'll be back. Thank you to Yavapai County Sheriff David Rhodes, independent realtor and founder of Halpern Residential, Trevor Halpern, and president of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Danny Seiden, for joining us this week. If you missed any of these interviews or would like to rewatch any of them, head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead to find out more information. Something new we are doing here on the show is asking a weekly poll question that we would like you to participate in. Every Sunday, we will ask a new question that could be about the economy, water, housing, or anything related to Arizona. This week, the question is, do you feel economically secure heading into 2025? All you have to do is head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead to respond to the poll question and tune in next week for another one. Next Sunday, it's a look at what's to come for the next 4 years as President-elect Donald Trump prepares for inauguration. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next Sunday on Broomhead.